Hey everyone, welcome to The Future is Golden. I'm Ruthie Kim, and this is a podcast where we explore what it looks like to step fully into your purpose, potential, and influence. And today, I have a special guest, and I'm very, very excited to introduce to you Joseph King Barkley. Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here, Ruthie. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Joseph, you are the president of the Meta Performance Institute. You are a coach, a trainer. You are formerly a pastor. You're a dad. You're a husband. You are many wonderful things. You also happen to be my coach for a little over a year. So glad to introduce you to the audience and for them to just kind of glean from our conversation today. So thank you so much for being here.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, let me introduce to our listeners why I'm excited about this conversation. So when I started this podcast, I was like, how do I lead with vulnerability? How do I almost kind of pull the curtain back on this topic of courage that we're exploring in this season? And I thought, what better than to just share from my own journey? And of course, you've been on that journey with me, maybe more so than most. You've kind of been under the hood in my life, seeing the highs and the lows and all of that. And so I think this is going to be a fun conversation. Are you ready? Are you ready to dive in?
I think so. Are your listeners ready?
That's a great question. We'll find out at the end. We'll see what the feedback is. Well, Joseph, one of the things that, you and I started diving into pretty early on in our coaching relationship was this idea of playing small. And you introduced that idea to me. I'd never heard of that before. Maybe some of our listeners, it may be new for them too. I wonder if we could just start by maybe having a conversation around what does that mean to you? I know you as a coach are probably hitting that topic with many people. How would you unpack that?
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't make up the idea, and it was something I continue to be challenged by my coach, and something that I see repeatedly as a pattern in most humans' lives. So if you feel like right now, as we explain this, if you're listening and you're thinking you might be playing small, just know that that's an extremely human thing to do. So playing small can show up in a few different ways. Playing small may just be a way of self-protecting yourself. Maybe you have played a big game before, taken big risks, and there has been some damage done. Maybe there's been disappointment. Maybe there's been rejection, and those are uncomfortable feelings. And so as a way of avoiding future versions of those feelings, you decide to stick with a routine or stay within the same job or not challenge, not see if you could take your marriage to another level, and have difficult conversations. There's a lot of ways in which we try to contain the possibility of pain in our lives. Another way I've noticed that people play small is that they play busy. And they fill up all the available time with activity. And they're getting a certain amount of results. And then they tell themselves a story that they're not going to make that next level of income. And they're not going to create that next level of health for themselves. Why? Because for however hard they're working, this is as good as they're going to get. And so by filling up all of the time with activity rather than pushing back every once in a while and examining whether or not their choices are productive, are going to crack through to another level, they're just settling for something that is less than they could be capable of, at the same time really burning themselves out.
Yeah, I love that, Joseph, because I think sometimes when we talk about playing small, we're often imagining that person kind of shrinking back in the corner, not doing much with their life. And actually that may be one manifestation, but some folk, myself, maybe others, resonate with this idea of kind of high performance. This like, I'm doing a lot of stuff, like my plate is full and I'm sort of bored. I'm not really taking risks, but when I think about taking risks, I actually don't want to make that swing. And I think that's what I realized when I started coaching with you was like, there were some things I really wanted in my life as we worked on vision and dreaming for the future and all of that beautiful stuff. There were some things I really wanted, but I felt like I wasn't the kind of person that could take those big swings, be that kind of person. I'm curious, Joseph, when we started working together, what did you see in me that made you go, I'm seeing some playing small? What did you observe?
That's great. Well, I should say this, I come into every coaching relationship, and I know you do the same, Ruthie, with the assumption that this human is capable of vastly more than they're currently experiencing.
Right.
And so then now it's like an investigation of trying to figure out in what way are they holding themselves back? Are they telling themselves a story that's keeping them maybe playing small or playing scared, playing angry, playing confused? Those are a lot of different ways that we show up. And so I came into our coaching relationship with that same assumption. This incredible person is capable of vastly more than she's experiencing. And so what I noticed in the early stages of our relationship was you had no shortage of activity. You had no shortage of passion and heart for what you wanted to see done in the world. But you also, at the time, and maybe this still continues to, whisper every once in a while, you had also told yourself a story that you were not somebody worth believing in. And that oftentimes when we as humans have stories like that, it's not necessarily that no one would ever want to believe in us, but we struggle to believe in ourselves.
Yeah.
And so you had a big idea, but I'm not sure they're going to go for this. I'm not sure anybody's going to want to show up. I'm not sure anybody's going to want to read that. I don't know if anybody wants to listen to me. And by first meeting you in that place of a lack of self-belief, then it opens you up to the possibility that, yeah, you are incredibly valuable to somebody in the world. And if you start from that assumption, then you get to communicate in ways, create big invitations, take big swings that put yourself out there for the people that you really can serve.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember. There's so many different examples in our early experience, Ruthie. The one that comes to mind immediately for me was your social media engagement.
Yes.
And
wasn't
how,
that cool?
And I'd be curious what it was like for you as you look back, but I remember experiencing somebody who was so charismatic and clear as she was communicating online. And yet at the time, you had a timidity around putting yourself out there online. And so people that you could serve didn't even know you existed and didn't know what you were putting out into the world because you were holding yourself back with that. What was that like for you?
Yeah. I mean, to your point earlier, like I think this, playing small is something that I continually addressing and noticing in my life. So I'm not on this podcast being like, I've overcome it. Like I never have fear when I hit post. Like that voice is still there. I think the work that we did and that I continue to do, Joseph, is okay, then maybe that story, maybe this is not for everyone, but there's another story too. And that one's actually more resourceful, which is this is valuable for someone. And am I willing to offer that? Because I think for me, I noticed, and this was surprising to me because, as an Enneagram 8 is a bit of a challenger. I suppose I've kind of prided myself on, I don't care what people think of me. And then when you get into the depths, it's like, actually, I do. I'm human, just like everyone else.
I know.
And I am kind of worried that if I hit post or if I do a big event or if I promote this thing or share this thing, that people will have opinions about me and thoughts about me. And so, I remember I joked it was a bit of a struggle. I remember some of our early coaching. It was kind of like I was making commitments to just post, Ruthie, just get up there and do something. And it's through taking those steps of action that I was like, ooh, interesting story, noticing what's coming up, getting curious about why was I playing small here? What was I afraid would happen? And so there was a lot of that narrative that was going on for me that I really had to work through. And it is still there. Like I am still with some of that. But that's kind of what it looked like for me, I think. What's coming up is seeing you thinking about something as I share that.
Yeah. Well, I remember a few breakthroughs for us happened when we got really, really clear and specific.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, you'd calculate how much money that your family could make, or you would calculate how much you would charge for a certain event based on your time, like how much time you were really putting into something. It's not a bad way to do it. That's perfectly fine if you want to calculate the value or an expense based on time. But then I remember going through exercises where it really parse out, like, how much is Ruthie really trading her time for? As she was investing so much of her precious time. And there was moments of breakthrough where it's like, my goodness, I'm paying myself $4 an hour for this idea. Like, okay, no problem. Is that what you want? Is that what you're committed to? And then you have a chance there to say, well, what's a higher value use of my time, or what maybe is a different rate that we're charging for certain opportunities. And then we get to go on the search for who would find that much value in the thing you're putting out to pay you for that. Because that's not everybody, and that's okay.
Right.
But that was one. And the other one that I remember, this breakthrough moment, was when we calculated how many potential women there were in the world that you could impact.
Yeah.
And then it became, rather than how do I impact a 50% of the 100 women that I'm in relationship with right now? It's like, what if you were only impacting 4% of the now billions of women that there were in the world? And just by putting it into a different framework, now it expanded who you were talking to, the possibilities that were available to you. A lot of times with clients, I'll talk about the difference between, or I'll talk about this idea of blue sea thinking. And this is another concept I did not make up, but it's a helpful frame of reference, where so much of our activity can be trying to find the fish in the same little pocket of water where 9 other people are fishing.
Right.
And instead, what if Ruthie was to explore the rest of the wide open blue ocean of people that she could be impacting? And how would she place herself out there where nobody else is actually going after people? Nobody else is reaching people. Nobody else is serving people. So how does she become distinctly herself in a way that reaches people who really desperately need the thing that you have to offer? And so that's another way of not playing small, but expanding what you think is possible for yourself. There's a few things that come to mind from our coaching experience.
Joseph, I'm thinking about another thing that came up, I think, with me that I kind of danced with back and forth, and you made me think that as you were talking about expanding, was this idea of like how one of the ways that playing small can look is making the vision smaller. And I noticed the temptation to do this again and again. Like, we would meet and I'd kind of blow out my vision, the billions of women. But then as it got hard, and then as the imposter syndrome, and then as the like, what are people thinking? I would just kind of, well, maybe it's just this. Like, maybe I could make it.
Sure.
And I think one of the big takeaways for me was like, I didn't realize how much I was trying to control my world to keep it small and manageable. Like, small felt like I was in control. It felt like I can manage this. And so there was a journey that I think I went on of, if I want to get big, if I want to play big, it also means I have to let go of control in some way too. I'm curious, like, what thoughts come up for you as I share that?
Yeah, I think we might even add let go of the illusion of control, because you never had it to begin with.
Absolutely.
But there's a very natural response to a big vision that every human has from time to time. If we were to paint a really clear picture of an exciting, thrilling future for yourself, and then pause for a second and get really honest about where you currently are, your current reality. Well, of course, you're going to notice there's some distance between where I currently am and where I'd love to be. And that distance, in our practice, we would call that the gap. There's a gap between where you are and where you just said you wanted to be. And that gap can often bring up emotions that are somewhat distressing for people. Gosh, the distance between where I am and where I want to be, I'm embarrassed that I'm not there. I should have been there by now.
Yeah.
That's going to be incredibly hard. That's going to be expensive. People are going to judge me if I try to swing for the fences on this. That's a whole reinvention. And people are used to seeing me one way, and now they're not going to like the new Ruthie. So there's all these like very natural, first reflexive responses to that gap. And if that's the only thing you have to work with, then I don't blame the average human for doing one of two things. or maybe both sometimes. And that is to inflate your current reality, to tell yourself that things are better than they actually are, or reducing that vision. Like you've done, I've done, so many have done before. Like, actually, you know what? I know that I said that I wanted to move to that new state and put my kid in that college, and I wanted my marriage to look like that. But actually, I don't need all of that. We even moralize it sometimes. Like, I don't need to be greedy. Like, I'm doing fine. I'm content. Yeah, of course you are. No problem. But we start to live for less. And what I would invite the listeners and certainly our clients to consider is the reason that we're doing that is not because the vision is unattainable, but because we don't like the initial emotions that we feel.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's okay if you're feeling freaked out. It's okay if you're feeling ashamed. It's okay. Like, let's pay attention to those things. They're real, but they're not telling you the most helpful story. Yeah. So what if we could relate to that gap with curiosity and adventure and love and excitement and anticipation? Well, then we can keep that current reality very clear and honest, and we can keep that vision nice and big, and then we have an opportunity to grow. That's what happens in that gap, is as we move towards that vision, we are learning new things, and we're developing new relationships because we're going to need people to help us, and we are trying and failing, so we're getting more data that'll help us to make wiser decisions in the future. We are developing transformation. Then you find out the vision really wasn't the thing all along. It was your own growth.
Yeah.
That the real joy and peace and excitement is happening as you're on your way to something else. And that's the beauty of keeping the vision right where it's at, nice and big and clear, and moving towards that thing for your own sake.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the work that we do with coaching, Joseph, and as I've experienced in my own life, is this becoming someone different. And I think one of the big shifts for me, and I think this is part of playing big, playing small, was to shift out of a mindset of like, well, fingers crossed, hopefully I'll just become the kind of person that can make that happen. Like, I'll wake up one day and I'll feel different, or I'll stumble into some kind of transformation, pivoting that mindset into, it's funny, we laugh, right? But I think a lot of us live that way. Like, oh, it'll just sort of happen. But shifting that mindset into, wow, asking myself the question, who do I need to become to make that vision a reality? That's an invitation, a question I want to answer. That implies I've got agency. I get to participate. I am in this process that I get to create versus just kind of being victim to my circumstances. And I think a lot of the work we did was like you constantly inviting me into, okay, Ruthie, that's a great vision. That's awesome. That's big. Who do you need to become? You need to become the person that shows up on social media. You need to become the person that maybe raises her rates. You need to become the person that invests in yourself. Like, there was a becoming that was just so powerful and so transformational. And even as I've checked off some results and feel closer to the vision, you're right. It's the becoming that I sit at the end of the day and feel really deeply proud of. Like, I am a different person, and you can't put a price tag on that, like that is powerful. Like, I'm on this podcast right now. I've been joking with a few people. I've talked about doing a podcast for years, and there's been so many reasons why. But I'm doing it now, and maybe not because I feel like I'm fully equipped or even fully ready, but because I've become the kind of person that's like, okay, doesn't need to be perfect. Like, I can just show up. I can go after that thing. That's been a part of becoming, I think, on my journey.
Well, and I think I certainly can tell myself a story that the people I admire don't feel the way I feel.
Yes.
The people I admire aren't scared of the things that scare me. And if that's the only story I have, then I will never get to experience anything like the people I admire are experiencing. And then I start to meet some of the people that I admire, and I find out, oh my goodness, you think that you were ugly in that post. And oh, you thought you sounded like an idiot. And oh, you wake up in a panic sometimes. And oh, you get discouraged. And it happens at every level of the game. It happens in every season of life. And what I do find, though, is the people who are experiencing more of what I want to experience have developed a certain reaction to those same feelings that I can develop. So, when I'm scared, that's a great opportunity for me to act with courage. When I want to seek control, that's actually a great opportunity for me to be okay with not getting this perfect, with just trying. When I want to, another thing that happens in control, and Ruthie, I've seen you grow in this big time, is when I want to seek to control, it's a great chance for me to make a request of somebody else to, this can feel kind of scary, maybe even for some of your listeners, is the thing that you thought you had to do all by yourself. Maybe that's a chance for you to make a really strong, scary, bold request of somebody in your life to lend a hand.
Yeah.
To hire somebody to do something, to delegate some responsibilities. And so even that is, the people that I admire most have developed certain reflexes to respond to the same feelings I have. And so who I need to become is actually not a completely different person necessarily, but it is a person who responds differently to the same fears that I've had for so long.
Yeah, love it.
And I saw you do that over and over again.
Joseph, I'd love to kind of just, as we're moving towards the end of our conversation, just talk a little bit about the courage of self-reflection. We kind of touched base on this. A lot of the work that we're doing as coaches is helping others do this work of like getting curious about their life. That occurs to me, and my experience of it is that takes a lot of courage to kind of pause where you're at and say, is this working for me? Is this what I want? What would I change? As you're working with clients, and I'm sure I have a few things to add too, but like as you're working with clients and doing this work, what are you noticing as like particularly like ingredients of courage? Like as you're doing that work how are you seeing people show up to the work of coaching, living their lives as a result of the self-reflection? What are you seeing them doing that occurs to you as being courageous?
What a great question. I think sometimes the act of slowing down and self-reflecting is an act of courage in and of itself.
Yes.
One of the reasons that some people, including myself, can busy our lives up is maybe subconsciously a means of avoiding self-reflection. If I can just fill up my available time, and when I'm not busy working, then I'm busy binging. I just fill up my attention span looking outside of myself at input and emails and tasks and teams outside of myself. And it might be a way for me to avoid something that I might be afraid to find out about myself. I might be embarrassed to admit about myself. I might get in there and notice something about myself and feel incapable of resolving it. So that is often why people will avoid self-reflection, is because they feel the most incapable of checking those things off of a list. So that's why just pausing, maybe even inviting in a therapist, an executive coach, a counselor, a trusted friend to help you. And I would even say in prayer, search me, God, know my heart, test me, know my anxious thoughts. What an incredibly powerful and liberating prayer, but terrifying at first.
Wow.
I want to see myself I want to see so clearly the things that I cannot resolve on my own. I want to see so clearly the things that are probably truly ruling my life. And it's like the invisible silent dictator of Joseph is the part of Joseph that he's not paying attention to. So just by doing that, not only is it an act of courage, but it really is an act of caring for yourself, because when you start there, and then there's resource, of course, that you bring in so that you're not stuck there. But when you start there, that is the first step towards real transformation and real freedom and real liberation.
Yeah. I'm listening to you, and I'm just thinking back on my own journey of the slowing down that was required in order to do that. Like you're saying, like it's easy to keep our schedules busy, our plates full, and you just kind of move. And before we know it, months and years have gone by. And so that courage just to pause and to really do the work. I think the courage too, like to bring somebody else into that process, because there's a self-reflection, we can do in our journaling, we can do in our own work. But like you said, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a pastor, a friend, whoever, to actually invite someone into the journey with you, to name some of that playing small with you, that was powerful in my work with you. And deeply uncomfortable, like to have someone kind of name that and be like, "Ooh, yeah, I'm seeing that. And this is what I want. I want that feedback. I want that mirror. I want that input in my life. I want someone on this journey with me because I know I need that. I want to take those big swings and want to have that courageous life." So I think, some of that, as I think about what courage looks like in the act of self-reflection. And I think then to not only stay in that place of self-reflection, but to take those swings, like you said, to make those bold requests. Like there's action that comes with that. And I think in the work that we do, we don't just sit around and navel gaze. It's not like just this like, ooh, let's look at all the pain. Let's look, look, isn't it difficult? But actually, no, what are we going to go do?
If I can squeeze in a thought there, even as we're wrapping up the conversation, I think you made such a powerful distinction there on why partnering with the right kind of advocate is so crucial. Because if you are to self-reflect and then that becomes its own destination for you, then that's another way of playing small, of holding yourself back. If you start to see, my goodness, I am beset with this ongoing terror of putting myself out there or applying for a new job or whatever the story is that you have. And you notice that about yourself, you get honest about that, and then you just sit there and woe is me. And I become my problem rather than somebody who has a challenge like every other person in the world. You become the challenge. And there are plenty of people in your life who are going to conspire with you to stay exactly the same. Yes. They need a victim in their life so that they can come and save you from time to time emotionally. They are feeling that same insecurity, and thinking or feeling anything different feels scary for all of us. So they want to keep you the same. Misery loves company. But to have an advocate who says, we're going to get really honest about these things because we don't want to run with a limp. We're not trying to do that. And we are going to move through them. We are going to find things that are more powerful than your fears that you also can choose. We're going to find something that's more exciting than your despair that you also can choose today, rather than you just becoming the things that you find in the dark. They just become things that no longer have to rule you. But again, I think I would say a phrase that we use a lot is you can't see yourself by yourself. And so having the right kind of advocate who can help point out like, it's interesting. Like when you say that, that might be a reflection of limiting belief that you have, or, some disempowered thinking that you have. I noticed that. And you're like, I suppose I hadn't thought about that. It's been years. I've been always thinking about the world that way. Yeah. Would it be helpful if you don't think about the world that same way anymore? Yeah. And then we're going to explore that together. So I just really wanted to reinforce that point, because you can have there's some power in identifying the issue, but then also having something that can break you out of it. Yes.
Because if my hope is that as people are listening to this podcast, they are feeling stirred towards courage. They are maybe noticing in their own life some playing small, maybe starting to hope for like, what would it look like to play big? Just as we wrap here, any final thoughts that you would love to share with the audience that might be kind of on the edge of some courageous action or courageous next steps? How would you cheer them on? How would you exhort them? How would you encourage them today?
I would encourage them by saying you probably already know the next bold thing that will create change in your life. And your choices will create the change, not your feelings. You're going to feel all kinds of feels about that big, scary next thing that you need to do. What would it look like for you today to choose to do something that you may not feel like doing? Because the choice will create the change, not just the feelings.
Wow. The choice will create the change. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Joseph. It's just been an honor to talk to you.
Thank you, Ruthie. What a pleasure.